Welcome to another episode of Sports and Discourse with your host, Derek Stevenson. And on today's episode, I want to discuss the topic of a universal basketball, right? And for anybody that's not aware of it, Kentucky uses a Nike basketball. I think, let me see what it's called. It's called the Nike Elite Championship Basketball, right? So through their contract with Nike, they have to use this basketball every time they play. You know, Nike makes some nice looking balls for them. They got the Kentucky logo on it with obviously the Nike check to let everybody know it's a Nike school, Nike brand from from the top to the socks. Well, can't even say that, to the shoes, right? So everything is all Nike, Kentucky, everything, right? But whenever the SEC championship or the SEC tournament, I'm sorry, and then into the NCAA tournament, sometimes things can get a little tricky because a lot of schools have to end up switching their basketball. So every school that's not a Nike school would have to switch to using the Wilson. I think it's called the Evo. Let me see what it's called. The Wilson EVO NXT basketball, right? And I'm not bringing this up to make an excuse, but a lot of different schools go the whole entire season playing with a specific basketball, and then when they get to the championship time, they have to switch to something that's completely foreign to them. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't think that the specs with basketball equipment was really that different, but apparently these basketballs feel noticeably different. The weight is noticeable. And I just didn't think that the specs could be that far off. I play golf a lot, right? And with golf, every company does things a little different. Sometimes they make the shapes of the golf clubs a little differently. They use different weights. They try to maneuver things to resell you equipment every year. So this year it's however much weight, 5 grams is pushed this far forward and it creates this much ball flight. They all try to sell you that there's a difference in the gear that they keep pushing out and creating. But if you really get down to the specs of it, it all still has to fit in this little standard, if you will, right? So no matter how far you try to, push the envelope, you have to keep everything within a certain spec range for your equipment to be legal. And I just automatically assumed that would be the same with basketball. I felt like all basketballs to a certain degree would feel this sort of close to the same. I definitely thought they would all weigh the same amount. So that's a little interesting to me because actually it's had a really, a decent effect on Kentucky's performance. I don't know, compared to other schools, I don't know how they transitioned, or I don't know how well they played or how poorly they performed when switching to different basketballs. But one thing I do know, I do have the stats for Kentucky, and they kind of interesting. Let me read them for you real quickly, right? So Kentucky this season, when they're using the Wilson EVO NXT, they shot 27 for 102 from 3-point line, which is 26%, which is bad, right? And when they used any other basketball, I don't know how many basketballs they actually got their hands on this season, but I'm assuming the majority of that was the Nike Elite Championship basketball. But when they used a different ball outside of the Wilson, they shot 38% from 3, right? Last season, in the 2 postseason losses, they shot 6 for 35, which is 17%. So Kentucky plays terrible when they use this Wilson EVO NXT basketball, right? They can't change their basketball from Nike. They're in the Nike contract, so they have to use the Nike basketball. But I wonder if there's anything Nike could do to maybe try to get the specs a little closer, because it does seem to be affecting them to a degree. Like, I'm not making an excuse, you know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, everybody that's a Nike school has to make the same adjustment. I'm not really for sure, but I think UConn, they probably are a Nike school, so they probably have the same basketball that Kentucky has all year long. And then they had to switch to the Wilson EVO as well. So I'm not making an excuse. Kentucky just got to figure it out. They got to learn to play good no matter what basketball they're using. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that they could have multiple basketballs floating around through college, and they could actually have specs that are noticeably different, right? Like, I don't want to say extremely different because I'm pretty sure they're not extreme, but if it's enough to notice, if it's enough to kind of make them, lose some of the touch and feel with the basketball, it could be something that, maybe the whole NCAA needs to try to figure out a situation where they can try to balance it out a little bit, because you don't want to have people using gear and it's so different that it affects some of the team's performances. So you guys let me know what you think. Do you think there should be a universal basketball, or do you like the idea that certain companies or certain schools have contracts with certain companies like Under Armour, Nike, for instance, and they use different gear? Just let me know how you feel about it, man, and we'll get back at it next time. Sports and Discourse with Derek Stevenson.